Nobody expected this. A 21-year-old from the Philippines just walked onto center court and ended a champion's reign. Wimbledon has a new superstar, and her name is Alex Eala. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to win. But 3 matches in, she has already rewritten history for an entire nation. This is the story of the upset that shook the tennis world, and the young woman who refused to blink under the brightest lights in the sport. Stay with us, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why everyone in tennis is suddenly saying her name. Every superstar has an origin story, but Alex Eala's is different from almost anyone else on the WTA Tour right now, because she is carrying the hopes of a country that has never had a moment quite like this. She did not grow up on grass courts in the Philippines, a nation where tennis infrastructure is nowhere close to what players in Europe or the United States take for granted. And yet here she was, at the most prestigious tournament in the sport, seeded 29th, walking into the second week of a Grand Slam for the first time in her career. Let that sink in for a moment. This is a player who, a year earlier, had lost in the very first round of Wimbledon to the defending champion, Barbora Krejcikova. 12 months. That's all it took for the story to flip completely. Heading into this year's tournament, Eala had quietly built momentum, arriving in London 10-3 on grass this season, and sharpening her game in the lead-up by partnering none other than 5-time Wimbledon singles champion Venus Williams in doubles at Bad Homburg. Think about that. One of the greatest champions the sport has ever produced chose to stand across the net from her in practice, preparing her for exactly this stage. Her tournament opened with a statement. She beat Mexico's Renata Zarazue in straight sets for her first career win at the All England Club, a first career win at 21 years old on one of the biggest stages tennis has to offer. Then she backed it up, grinding past Maya Joint to punch her way into the third round. No one was talking about her yet, not really. She was still the underdog, still the story buried beneath the bigger names, Sabalenka, Goff, Swiatek, Rybakina. But underdogs have a way of forcing you to pay attention. And what nobody realized as Eala walked out for her third-round match was that she was about to deliver one of the most talked-about upsets of the entire tournament. Because on the other side of the net stood the defending champion, the 6-time Grand Slam winner, the player who 12 months earlier had lifted the Wimbledon trophy on that very same center court, Iga Swiatek. And in the sport of tennis, there is no bigger proving ground than standing across from a reigning champion on the lawn where she made history. For Eala, this wasn't just another match. This was the moment that would decide whether she was simply a nice story or something much, much bigger. What happened next would send shockwaves through the entire tennis world. This is where the story turns from nice underdog run into the biggest upset of Wimbledon 2026. Because what Alex Eala did on center court against Iga Swiatek wasn't just a win. It was a dismantling of a champion, point by point, nerve by nerve. Swiatek came in with every reason for confidence. She'd survived a scare in her opener, battling past Taylor Townsend, then looked sharp again against former finalist Karolina Pliskova. She was the defending champion, the 6-time major winner, the player with far more experience on the biggest courts in the world. Eala, by contrast, had never even been this deep in a slam before. On paper, this shouldn't have been close. But tennis doesn't always follow the paper. Swiatek actually found herself trailing before clawing her way back into the first set, forcing a tiebreak where she held 2 set points of her own. This was the moment that separates a good run from a legendary one. On those 2 set points, the champion played it safe, and the challenger did not. Eala went for her shots instead, and it paid off. She converted her own set point to steal the tiebreak. Tennis World USA, Tennis World USA. Watch a match like that closely and you'll see it. The instant the momentum shifts, you can almost feel the air change on center court. Swiatek's level collapsed after that tiebreak. She dropped the first 4 games of the second set, and she simply never recovered. The final score read 7-6, 6-2. But scorelines never tell the emotional story. This wasn't a competitive 3-setter that could have gone either way. This was a changing of the guard, happening in real time, in front of thousands of stunned fans and a global broadcast audience. Tennis up to date. And it wasn't just about nerve. There was a tactical story hiding inside this upset too, one that reveals just how smart Eala's game really is. Broadcasters covering the match noted that Eala's average second serve speed sat at just 74 miles per hour, dramatically slower than the WTA Tour average of 86. On paper, that sounds like a weakness. On center court, it became a weapon. Swiatek herself would later admit the slower rhythm scrambled her timing completely, forcing her into a string of uncharacteristic errors she couldn't explain away. Tennis head. Think about the psychology of that for a second. Here is one of the most dominant players of her generation, a 6-time Grand Slam champion, being outthought and outfought by a 21-year-old who many assumed would be overwhelmed by the occasion. Instead, it was the champion who looked overwhelmed, and as the final point landed and Eala dropped to her knees on the grass, the entire complexion of Wimbledon 2026 changed in an instant. But the story was only getting started, because what happened on the other side of the net was about to become just as big a talking point as the win itself. Upsets are dramatic enough on their own, but what turned this into one of the defining moments of the tournament was what came next, the raw, visible emotion from the player who had just lost her crown. As the first set slipped away, cameras caught Swiatek's frustration boiling over. She yelled out in anger after dropping the opening set, directing her outburst toward her own coaching team. Then came the moment that spread across social media within minutes. Swiatek was seen flinging her racket toward her bag after Eala surged ahead in the tiebreak. For a player known for her composure, known for 6 Grand Slam titles built on discipline and control, this was jarring to watch, and tennis fans noticed immediately. Within minutes, clips of the outburst were everywhere. The reaction split almost instantly into 2 camps. One side reached for empathy. "It's really sad, I never saw her reacting like that before," one fan wrote, while another questioned aloud whether something deeper was going on with the Poles game this season. Other fans pushed back on the idea that there was anything shameful about it at all. "That's normal, you cannot just expect her to be happy," one wrote, while another added, "Of course it's heartbreaking to lose, she was champ." This is where the story stopped being just about a scoreline and became about something much more human. Because losing on center court, as the defending champion, in the exact place you lifted the trophy 12 months earlier, that's not just a tennis result. That's a very public, very raw moment of vulnerability, played out in front of millions. And the timing made it sting even more. This wasn't a one-off bad day. It was part of a pattern that had been building across the entire season. Swiatek arrived at Wimbledon already searching for answers, and this defeat only deepened the questions swirling around her form. Every rally, every missed return flash of frustration became another data point in a much bigger conversation. What is happening to one of the greatest players of this era? Meanwhile, on the other side of the draw, a very different story was unfolding. While the tennis world dissected Swiatek's meltdown frame by frame, Eala simply kept walking forward. She didn't celebrate excessively. She didn't say a word about her opponent's frustration. She let her tennis speak, and then she let her words afterwards speak just as loudly, with a grace that stood in stark contrast to the chaos surrounding the match. But the fallout from this result was far from over, because for Swiatek, the consequences were about to get a lot more serious than a single racket toss. Every big upset has a cost for the player on the losing end, and for Iga Swiatek, this one hit hard in ways that extended far beyond a single afternoon on center court. The numbers told a brutal story. Swiatek was set to lose 1,870 ranking points from her Wimbledon title defense, dropping to at least world number 6. For a player who had sat at world number 1 not long ago, tumbling outside the top 5 is more than a statistic. It's a very public marker of decline, the kind that follows a player into every headline, every broadcast graphic, every conversation about the state of the women's game. Her 2026 season now sits without a single title, and Wimbledon marked yet another early exit in a year defined by inconsistency, far from her dominant clay court form. Tennis World USA. Tennis Up to Date. And it wasn't just about the ranking. It was about the pattern repeating itself on the biggest stages. Swiatek has now failed to reach the semifinals in each of the last 4 Grand Slams she has played, a staggering statistic for someone with 6 major titles to her name. This wasn't an isolated bad match. This was a champion who seemed to be searching for her old identity on court, match after match, tournament after tournament, without finding it. Tennis 365. The tennis world reacted accordingly. Analysts picked apart her return game. Commentators debated whether the issue was mental or technical. And in the middle of all that noise, Swiatek herself tried to offer clarity, though even her own explanation revealed just how unsettled she was. "I think it was tougher mentally for me to accept these missed returns from the slow serves," she admitted. "I gotta say, it's much tougher to return a serve like that than a normal serve." It was an honest answer, but it was also an admission that she had been out-strategized by a player many had dismissed heading into the match. Tennis head. Perhaps most striking was how far she seemed to be pulling back emotionally from the results altogether. "Honestly, I don't care anymore about the results," she said. "I've been so focused on them that it's hard to continue like that. I'm not on that level yet." For a 6-time Grand Slam champion to say those words, live on camera, tells you everything about where her head was in that moment.
This wasn't false humility. This was a champion publicly wrestling with a version of herself she didn't recognize. Tennis 365. And through it all, the shadow hanging over the entire conversation was simple and undeniable. The player responsible for this crisis of confidence was a 21-year-old from the Philippines who had never been ranked inside the top 30 in her career. The bigger the fall, the bigger the story, and this fall was enormous. But while one player searched for answers in the wreckage, the other was about to show the tennis world exactly who she was, not just as a competitor, but as a person.
If Chapter 4 was about collapse, this chapter is about character. Because in the hours after the biggest win of her career, Alex Eala didn't chase the spotlight or lean into the drama surrounding her opponent. She did something far more powerful. She spoke with humility, gratitude, and a sense of purpose that went far beyond her own result. "I hold Wimbledon very close to my heart," she said afterward. "Being able to play here on center court the second year in a row, it's amazing for me to be able to do that and have these intense moments." Notice what she didn't say. No mention of the outburst across the net, no gloating about the rankings she'd just toppled, just gratitude for the stage itself. She was equally candid about her own emotions in the moment. "I think I'm trying to collect them at the moment," she admitted, about her feelings after the win. "Of course, so many emotions, such an intense battle. I'm really proud of how I fought and I held my own out there." This wasn't a robotic athlete reciting talking points. This was a young woman genuinely processing one of the biggest moments of her life, in real time, in front of the cameras. Brit watched sports. But it was what she said next that turned this from a great sports story into something genuinely moving. Asked about what this run meant for her home country, a nation that had never seen a player, male or female, reach the stage of a Grand Slam, Eala didn't make it about herself. "It's an honor to be able to pave the way for young girls," she explained. "It would be the honor of my life to be able to inspire others." And then came the line that captured everything about who she is. "I don't want them to look at me and say, I want to be the next Alex Eala. I want them to look at me and say, wow, I want to be the first me. I want to make my own path." Read that again. A 21-year-old, hours removed from beating a 6-time Grand Slam champion on the most famous court in tennis, chose to use her moment not to build a legacy around herself, but to hand the torch forward to every young girl watching back home who might never have believed this was possible. That's not just a tennis quote. That's the kind of statement that outlives a scoreline. It's worth remembering, too, that this wasn't some fluke first meeting between these two players. Eala now leads her head-to-head against Swiatek 2-1, having first beaten her at the Miami Open in 2025. This wasn't lightning striking once. This was a genuine rivalry, quietly building, match by match, until it exploded onto the biggest stage of all. Swiatek herself seemed to sense it too, offering one of the more telling lines of the entire tournament when she admitted, "She also played great. She used her chances. She went for it. You need to be brave in Wimbledon to win these points." Brave. That's the word the defending champion chose to describe the player who just ended her title defense. And bravery, more than any ranking or seed number, is exactly what carried Alex Eala into the second week of Wimbledon for the very first time. Tennis 365, Tennis World USA.
So here's the question worth sitting with as this tournament continues. Was this simply one incredible upset on one incredible afternoon? Or are we watching the opening chapter of a genuine new rivalry at the top of women's tennis? Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the biggest moments, rivalries, and controversies in women's tennis. We're just getting started.